Hey everybody, this is Dr. Holcomb. In this video, I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to go over the guidelines for your first essay or paper, the rhetorical analysis, and then I'm going to talk briefly about, I'll show you an example, a student example of a fairly good rhetorical analysis from one of my students in past semesters. Both of these documents will be available or should be available right now on Blackboard under week 4 module. Okay, paper 1, rhetorical analysis. Your analysis should be 3 to 4 pages long, and I'm talking 3 to 4 pages, double spaced, using a 12-point font. The draft for the peer review is due September 14th, so that's about 9 days from now. So that's plenty of time for you to work up a draft, and your draft should be a complete draft. It can't be a partial draft. And the peer review, draft for peer review means what we're going to do. We're going to do this in 2 stages. You're going to have a draft that you're going to share with a classmate and get feedback from that classmate on the 14th, and then you'll have a week to get that feedback back and then incorporate it into one more intervening revision before you turn it into me for my comments, which will be a week from September 14th. I think we'll call that the 20th or the 21st. I'll give you a definitive date, but it's going to be one of those two. So let's look at the assignment description. For this paper, you are to write a rhetorical analysis, one that focuses on how a text functions in a specific context with respect to the the writer-reader subject matter style and purpose. This is just a kind of standard approach to rhetorical analysis. You might also think in terms of one of the videos that we saw in the past about thinking about rhetorical choices and their effects. It's kind of what we're talking about with functions. And one of the sort of defining features of a rhetorical analysis is its attention to the context. That includes the writer, the reader, the subject matter, and so on. The paper follows a relatively standard structure: introduction, analysis, and conclusion. The introduction should identify the text to be analyzed, offer any background information your reader might need. So assume that your reader is familiar with the text you're analyzing, but may need some reminding about particular parts of it. Okay, define the problem that the analysis will solve or the questions it will answer. Another way of thinking about this is you might frame this as the rhetorical challenges the author faces in delivering his or her text. Then deliver your analysis overall thesis, and then preview the paper's organization. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a concrete example of this from a student paper. When formulating your thesis, make sure your claim solves the problem you defined or answers the question you pose. Hold on, let me get this thing scrolling. When previewing your paper's organization, you might mention the features you will analyze in particular, for instance, ethos, pathos, and logos. But having said that, try to go beyond a cookie-cutter approach and simply claim something like the following: President Obama tries to persuade his audience by using ethos, pathos, and logos. That thesis could apply to any speech he's ever delivered as president. What you want to do is you want to tailor your thesis so that it fits the text you're analyzing in all of its specificity. Okay. Instead, your thesis should emerge organically out of how you define the analytical problem, question, or rhetorical challenge. And don't feel limited to only discuss ethos, pathos, and logos. Typically, there's a lot going on in any text, so you might focus on rhetorical devices and other rhetorical devices and persuasive resources. For instance, an author's use of metaphor or narrative or humor and how they function. Metaphor, narrative, humor, those are choices, and how they function, effects. Okay, the analysis should follow the structure outlined in your preview. We'll see an example of this in a second. And it should include quotes from the speech to back up your claims, as well as interpretations of those quotes so that your reader will know how you arrived at those interpretations. The conclusion should focus on the payoffs of your analysis. Here, this is the so what moment. What have we learned from your analysis that we didn't know before? What are your analysis more general implication? And then finally, be sure to proofread your analysis carefully and eradicate as many grammatical errors, typos, and stylistic stumbles as possible. So even though this is a draft, it should be a fairly polished draft. I'd rather spend my time responding to what you've said and how you've what you said than editing kind of typos and grammatical infelicities. Okay, and the other point that I should make is that you're probably going, well, what text are we analyzing? You can pick any of the readings that we've done so far. You can go back to your syllabus and kind of review what have we read from the Carolina rhetoric. I'm not talking about the textbook part. I'm talking about either the texts that are embedded in the chapter, like on the Arizona shooting or Obama's address on the death of bin Laden, or towards the end of the rhetoric. Those are the essays like the George Saunders or the Path Forward. Okay, let's look at an example. This comes from a student who was analyzing a speech that President Obama delivered back in 2014 in Nashville. Okay, just a quick, this is just kind of standard MLA formatting. So name, my name, the class, and the date. Make sure you have a title that's more than just rhetorical analysis. Here, the student chose President Obama Connects with Audience. That is fairly general. It could probably be a little bit more specific, but it's not. It gets the job done. So let's look at the introduction. And just a reminder, we often think of language as something that just conveys information, or in the case of like fiction or narrative, it represents behavior. One of the things that I'm going to stress throughout this semester is that language itself is a form of action, that we do things in and through language. We make promises, we make bets, in academic discourse, we advance arguments, we review literature. I think if you can wrap your head around the idea that any particular genre of writing is a fairly stable set of moves, then I think you're going to become a more effective writer. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what are the expected moves that I'm supposed to make, and then you execute them. So let's look at this introduction. At a high school in Nashville, Tennessee in late January of 2014, Barack Obama delivered a speech in which he stressed the importance of U.S. Students receiving a world-class education. Here, this is just straight summary and background information. He discussed the improvements within our educational systems that have been made and those that will be made. Probably could do without, find a different way of saying this without the passive voice here and the passive voice here. But again, delivering more specific background information about the speech. He also shared his own personal experience with his education, talking about the value of learning and the many doors it opens. So this is all a summary and an introduction to the actual text of the speech. Here with the green text, there's a pivot. There's another kind of move happening. This is where the writer is delivering his thesis, and he's doing it over three or four sentences here. Typically a thesis will come in one sentence, but here it's distributed across four. Throughout his speech, Obama tries to relate with the viewer as much as possible, knowing that if he can relate to the audience, the likelihood of them responding to his speech in a positive manner increases. Okay, here it's a way of talking about one of the rhetorical challenges that he faced in this particular situation, President Obama, and that is to relate to the audience. His tone is positive and uplifting. He wants the viewer to be excited about education and the path this country is taking. To secure these goals, he used various rhetorical device. Okay, with this last sentence, there's another pivot to another move. Okay, here we know that the writer's about to tell us what those devices are. At least that's the expectation. And here with this yellow text, we get what I call a preview of the organization of the paper. First, he was very sympathetic towards the community, which allowed them to open up to what he had to say. Second, he made a point to relate to the audience as much as possible, and also attempted to make his speech relevant to everyone in attendance. Lastly, he used a positive tone throughout his speech and made it seem less about solving a problem and more about praising the efforts of the students, teachers, and parents. This gives you a very clear roadmap of what to expect in the rest of the paper. It also announces the main analytical categories. Notice that there's no mention of ethos or pathos here, but that's kind of what is implied. This writer's using alternative language to the just ethos, pathos, and logos, but still keeping focused on rhetorical properties of this speech. Okay, and there's also a collection not only announcing the organization of the paper, but a kind of collection of little mini claims too that we expect the writer to support in each of these three sections. Okay, and if you look at the rest of the piece, look at this first first sentence of the next paragraph. President Obama makes himself come across as empathetic individual to the audience, which allows them to open up emotionally to the president and his ideas. This echoes this part. He is very sympathetic towards the community, which allowed them to open up to what he had to say. So already, what you can think about this part, the roadmap, as a kind of contract with the reader. This is how I'm going to present my information. If this particular writer had started with, hey, say the second one about relating to the audience as much as possible, then you kind of violated the contract. So whatever order they appear in here, they have to appear throughout the rest of the text in that order. So it picks up point 1. And then immediately moves into some textual evidence. He does this, that is showing himself as an empathetic individual. That's ethos, which is operating also in conjunction with pathos, making the audience emotionally receptive to the president. He does this by recognizing that it's been a tough week for the school, and then right into a quote from the president. And following that quote with an interpretation. Being in Tennessee, President Obama knows he is in the Bible Belt by stating, okay, there's a recognition of the specific context of the speech, Tennessee Bible Belt. By stating at the beginning of his speech that he is praying for the families and the students, it allows him to be accepted in a meaningful way by most of the population. And then a further kind of interpretation or specification, interpretation of that text. So that's what you want to do. You want to pick up the claim from your preview, launch into some textual evidence, and then follow it up with some good substantive interpretation. The next paragraph picks up the next thing from the roadmap, the next item from the roadmap or the preview. The president also does his best to relate to this audience as much as possible. And framing it as a kind of rhetorical challenge. Being the president of the United States, relating to the average American can be a hard thing to do at times, but it's imperative that he try in order to make him seem trustworthy in the eyes of the viewer. Okay, more ethos. And again, text and interpretation. I won't go through all of this. And then lastly, this is the third item from the preview. Obama adopts an uplifting tone throughout his speech. Again, textual evidence and interpretation. And let's go down to the conclusion. This is the final paragraph. President Obama strategically uses many rhetorical devices throughout the speech in order to get a positive response. Okay, this part kind of rehearsing what the analysis has done. I prefer this to be a little bit shorter. And then right here with this yellow text, you get the sense that the writer is moving in